Welcome to Revelations with Erin Pizzey. On this show, we will be exploring the issues faced by men and boys everywhere. Your host, Erin Pizzey, opened the first ever domestic violence refuge for battered women and children in Chiswick, England. What she found, however, was that many of the women coming into her shelter were as violent as the men they were fleeing. Over the years, she also tried to create resources and safe spaces for men as well as women, but frequently met with indifference and hostility to men's suffering.
For so many years, feminists have been able to demonize men under their artificial argument called patriarchy. Hi, I'm Erin Pizzey, and through working with battered women in my refuges, I saw for myself how family violence is passed on from one generation to the next. Quite simply, violent behavior is often carried forward into adult relationships. Family violence is not a gender issue, and never was. It's a generational issue. Feminists have had people believe that men are responsible for all the violence in our society. There is sufficient evidence that both men and women can be equally violent in their personal relationships.
The truth is that men and boys are not privileged in our society, but are often marginalised, disadvantaged and ignored. Welcome to Revelations with Erin Pizzey and her co-host, Dean Esme.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Saturday, April 26, 2014 episode of Revelations with Erin Pizzey. I, as per usual, am Erin's co-host, Dean Esme, and with us, as always, is the lovely Erin Pizzey. Say hi to everybody, Erin.
Hello, everybody.
How's life in London these days? Lovely,
the sun's shining, I've got a cup of tea, all's well with the world.
Excellent. You told me you were making a curry before showtime.
Yep, it's delicious. I've just added coconut milk.
Oh, good. Your doctor would probably tell you that's bad for you, but heck with him. Heck with him. Well, Erin, I'm pleased to say that this week we are joined by the president of one of the most important men's organizations, the National Coalition for Men. The National Coalition for Men has been around for many, many years and does a lot of excellent work. Their current president is Harry Crouch. Are you there this morning, Harry?
Yes, good morning to both of you.
Hey, good to hear from you. So, Harry, tell us a little bit about the National Coalition for Men. Where you're located out of San Diego, or headquarters in San Diego, I should say, right?
Excuse me. Yes, I think headquarters is a good way to say it, because our organization is very spread out. We've been around for over 35 years. I like to say we must be doing something right, but we're not a top-down organization. And what I mean by that is we don't give orders and expect people to jump. We're basically supply resources and a reputation to those people who wish to join us and pursue interests within our areas of interest, which are basically anything having to do with men, boys, their families, and the women who love them.
That's excellent. I like that phrasing. I understand that you're actually a registered nonprofit charity, right?
We're a 501c3, and we have been since, I believe, 1982. We were founded in Maryland several years before that under a different name, under the name Free Men. And then it went from Free Men to Free Men, Inc. And then it went to the coalition of, the word the Coalition of Free Men, Inc., because an attorney screwed up. And that's still our legal name. Our legal name is the Coalition of Free Men, Inc. But our DBAs, we do business as the National Coalition for Men, or NCFM, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit.
And what that means is, at least if you're in the U.S., you can get a tax deduction for donating to the NCFM. One of the things I also noticed recently is Amazon.com has this option where they'll donate something like 1% or something of what you purchase to the charity of your choice. And I noticed the Coalition for Free Men is there, and I guess that's you guys, huh?
That's correct. We have not gotten confirmation yet that they've received our information, but that's not unusual. Since the nature of business, we often don't get replies.
Well, that's very interesting, because I recently purchased something on NCFM, and they asked me about, or on Amazon, and they asked me about it, and I said, well, what free? I looked for the National Coalition for Men, and it said Coalition for Free Men right here. All right, and clicked. So maybe one of these days you're going to get a check from Amazon. That'd be nice, anyway.
I've had a number of people come in and ask me about it, and wanted to use us through their purchases. So we did the things that Amazon wanted, but we're supposed to get a response from them, and we just haven't gotten that yet. So it's probably in their feminist department for waiting approval.
Oh, don't tell me that even Amazon is contaminated.
Oh, I have a better one, guys. A young man calls me up yesterday. I get calls all the time on various things, and he's very concerned and he's a single dad. Having trouble seeing his child. But you guys know the story there. But he's offended because apparently Apple, their iPhones, I'm not an Apple user, but their products come with a built-in calendar. And the built-in calendar has all the normal holidays except one. Would you like to guess what it is?
Father's Day.
Exactly, Father's Day.
Father's Day is not on it. Oh, I was going to say International Men's Day, but no, that wouldn't. Of course, that wouldn't be on there.
But I would. So go ahead, Harry. I'll speak after you. Go ahead.
Well, just to finish the story a little bit, he took it upon himself to contact Apple, and he worked through the maze a little bit, and he got to some technical level, which told him it was the highest he was ever going to get, and that they would do nothing to change it because they hadn't received enough complaints yet. So over the next few days, Dean, perhaps we can help remedy that, and we'll do a petition or some sort of thing, and
it's a very good idea. Let everybody listening to us now, and hopefully on YouTube when they listen.
Yes.
Just remember to get hold of Amazon and to protest loudly.
Apple, you mean?
Apple
in this case.
Apple. That's right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Second story. I was
who at Apple would we contact about that?
Well, I don't know. I'm waiting to hear back from him. He was going to send me an email. Matter of fact, what I asked him to do, and maybe one of your listeners could do this too, we need to actually find a mailing address for the whoever's running Apple now, and also in charge of marketing. The large internet-based organizations prefer to be contacted by email, but of course they receive gazillions of emails every day, and I seriously doubt that our email would make it to the top, cream of the top. So I think we need to do a letter, which we'll put on NCFM letterhead, and maybe a Voice for Men can do the same, but we need to get a letter to whomever runs the place, as well as the complaints going through the email process, as well as perhaps an online petition, maybe target 1,000 people or something. Which
you get me that info, Harry, and we'll give Apple some hell. It seems like a trivial thing, but anything that gets attention, right?
Actually, that's more true than I think a lot of people think. I'd be glad to give you an example if you like.
Sure.
We recently, we have a number of attorney members in NCFM, and we have for years, and they've accomplished great things through our efforts through civil suits. And we can talk about those if you wish. However, what I want to bring to your attention is a recent one in Glendale. And Erin, you must live close to Glendale when you're in L.A.
Yeah, I'm in Studio City.
Oh, yeah, okay. So Glendale, just a couple of weeks ago, they had arranged for this is Sexual Awareness Month, so they were going to have free martial arts training for women and girls using a private business to do the training on public property. Well, come on, guys. I mean, that's such a blatant violation of the California Constitution, a specific law in California called the Unruh Act, as well as federal constitution and federal governments. It's just ridiculous that a municipality would be engaged in such horrific violations of constitutional and other law. And we sent them a very nice letter, several pages long, laying out the law and suggesting that they reconsider and try to find that programs are suitable for people regardless of gender. We're still awaiting a response, but they canceled the first 2 classes. And what happened was we generated considerable media up at, particularly in the LA area. You know, we had numerous newspaper articles, television stories, radio stories. And through the process of one letter, we were able to help raise awareness in one of the largest urban areas on the planet, or at least the United States. So sometimes it's a small thing that helps us raise awareness and affect change over time. And that was the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, it's a really good point as well. I was going to ask you, when did you first get involved?
Oh, good Lord, Erin, I hate that question.
No, I think it's interesting. No, I'm just going to go back with you in time.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Because I'm just interested in what was happening when you first got involved. As you know, when I first started, there was nothing, absolutely nothing.
That's correct.
So I had 4 clear years until the feminists in England actually hijacked. Now, I at that point was having trouble with, I'm trying to remember her name, Del Martin. She was in California, and she was a rigorous radical lesbian, and she opened the first refuge in California, which immediately refused to have any male staff and all the principles that had by then been set up. And I was already, and by that time, I had come to Denver to help open a shelter there. Even then, I realized that what was happening was going to work hugely against men. So I'm wondering at what stage you came in and what the playing field looked like when you first started, and how much has it changed?
Well, I came in a totally different door.
Yeah.
I spent most of my life in Anchorage, Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
At a young age, I designed and implemented pretrial intervention programs, the Alaska court system statewide. And I ran employment and training programs, or audited them, monitored them. I was an assistant ombudsman, and Garen, you above all people would know what an ombudsman is, because it's a European concept. But in Alaska, in the municipality and state level, that was truly a fourth branch of government, like in Europe.
Yeah.
Where we actually had subpoena power.
Yeah.
And through all that experience, I'd worked with a lot of what they called hard-to-serve people, especially felons, and eventually ended up with a business partner. We had a vocational counseling rehabilitation program, doing contract work on felons, post-release and pre-release programs. Mm-hmm. And in that capacity, I met a woman who had issues, who had serious issues. Like you see in the movie when they come in your office and destroy it on Valentine's Day,
Yeah.
She came into a restaurant downstairs one evening, virtually naked in the winter because she was concerned where I was supposed to be. You've heard the stories. I could go on and on and on. Attacked my house and a bunch of other things. In that capacity, I reached out through the community to try to find some resources and recognize there were none. Mm-hmm. Not only that, I was told that I should tell nobody because I would get an adverse reaction. Because back then, 1990, men weren't supposed to talk about things like that. And finally, I said,
"Wait a minute! I missed something here, Harry. This was a woman who was acting up that you were having trouble getting resources for, or was she attacking a man? Is that what you're?"
Yeah, the man she was attacking was me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
Erin asked how I got involved.
Yeah.
Came through a different door.
Yeah.
And so I looked at my partner Steve and I said, they just formed this new commission. It's called the Alaska Commission on, what the hell is it called? Commission on Status of Women. So I'm going to call that woman up, and the next time she's in Anchorage, let's go have lunch with her and get some money, and we'll do some program for abused men. There's got to be more than me. And so Steve didn't really want to talk about it. He was a wonderful guy, by the way. But anyway, he agreed, And that's exactly what we did. And I'll tell you as closely I can what she told me. Quote, as close as I can get it. Harry, it will be a cold day in hell before I, the Commission of Status of Women, or anybody else in the Alaska government gives you a penny to help abused men. Or let me rephrase that, to help men. And that's the way it stood. And so I thought to myself, as self, since as an ombudsperson in my other roles, I had basically been a problem solver, right, in government. And I said, well, I'll just take 6 months and fix this shit. I mean, this can't be right. And I've been at it ever since.
Yeah, rather long 6 months, huh?
Rather long 6 months. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this is the only thing that I've seen from those very early days is that it went from a fairly shambolic movement to where suddenly, when everybody had realized that there was this huge amount of money available for funding refugees, virtually there was overnight money was poured into the women's movement, not because they were going to open shelters to actually rescue women and children, but essentially they were going to build an empire for themselves and ring-fence it so men could never have any money from however much they raised in the billions, and men would never be allowed to even find out because they're unaccountable. No men can work there. No men can sit on a board. Small boys of 9 and 12, after that, they actually can't come into the refuges. So this is now what we're facing after all these years. And I'm wondering how you see it, if you see it the way I do, or do you think there's more hope than I have?
Well, number one, I'd like to expand that concept a little bit. I think the domestic, you guys know who Phil Cook is, right? Wrote the Accused Men Inside Domestic Violence.
He's a friend of mine,
We even had him on the show. It was a great show.
Yeah, when I first really wanted to get into this, I got an airplane, I figured out who he was, and I flew down to Oregon, went over to his house, and said, okay, what the hell's up? And I said, I'm interested in this stuff, but I need more information. What's going on? And this is years ago. And Phil and I had this conversation back then, and he thought, over the years, we've had, of course, numerous conversations, but somewhere in there we had a conversation about the domestic violence industry, and Phil thinks it's the hub of what I coined a phrase years ago called the woman industries.
Yeah.
And we were talking about my phrase, the women industries, and he thought the domestic violence industry was the hub of the wheel. I disagreed. I said, I think it's the grease that makes the wheel turn. Because whenever anybody in the women industry, whether you talk about child support services or child protective services or Department of Child Support Services or elder abuse, I mean, you name it, whatever it is, what's happening now with the civilian intrusion into the military and the revision of sexual assault charges or on our college campuses and the promulgation of ridiculous things about things like now if you're accused of sexual assault, if you're a guy, you have no right to an advocate, no right to an attorney, no right to cross-examine your accuser, no right to state your case before a review board. I mean, it's just absurd. And now they have this affirmative consent standard that during sex, you have to keep affirming the fact that you want it. It's absurd stuff. Well, all these things have to do with the domestic violence industry. And it was the domestic violence industry and their very successful media assault convincing the world that all men were bad and all women were victims that kind of got us in this predicament. But they weren't the first ones to launch. There was the victim compensation program, which is much larger than the DV programs. And nobody ever talks about that or looks at it.
What victims conversation? The what?
Exactly.
No, really, seriously, tell me about it. I don't even know what it is, and now I feel stupid.
Well, no, don't feel stupid. Most people don't know what it is. And that's the way they want it. The victim compensation, you'll find in every state there's a victim compensation board, a victim compensation department, a victim compensation something or other. The federal government pours gazillions of dollars into these programs every year. And so if you're the victim of a crime, you can make application to the Victim Compensation Program for recompense. And you can ask for assistance. You can ask for legal assistance, relocation assistance, housing assistance, get them to pay for your medical bills, all sorts of stuff. Okay? And they're particularly good at doling out the money as long as you don't have a what? A penis.
So it's for women only.
They won't say that, and that's not what the law says, but
It's
that's
what happens.
substantially correct. We recently applied to the state of California to become, what's it called? A safe, let me get it. It's a safe home program, a safe something or other. This is a program through which DV victims can make application for confidentiality, right? And have their names protected. And so we sent out, it's called Secretary of State, blah, blah, blah. California Save at Home program. So we did all the stuff we're supposed to do. We got a call from Sacramento confirming the fact that we're a nonprofit and we work with DV victims, which we do. And everything was going just perfectly, except we can't get a confirmation on a training date. And what it appears to be now is that they've shut us out. They've done the research and found out who we are and are probably not going to allow us to participate in the program. So we'll sue. I mean, we'll take them to task. We'll do something with them.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Harry. I mean, as long as I do this stuff, there's still always something new for me to learn. I just looked. I went into Google. I see in my own state of Michigan. I Googled up, Michigan Victims Compensation. Boom. Michigan Department of Community Health, crime victim compensation, and there's 4 really good pictures of women there.
How about that?
How about that? And there it is.
So, when people want to know...
Even though men are twice as likely to be victims of violent assault and
that.
That's
right. That's right. That's exactly right.
That's astounding.
A few years ago, I was wondering, well, exactly how many DV programs are there? I mean, exactly how many shelters are there? Exactly, how the story goes, because it's a billion-dollar industry. And I came across this National Directory of DV programs from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Have you guys seen this monster?
No.
No? You ought to get a copy. It's fun reading. It's, I'm looking at it, and I could measure it, but it's at least 2 1/4 inches thick. Mm-hmm. They didn't number the pages. It's a big book, like a full 8 by 11 pages. Mm. There's at least 500 pages in here, maybe more, by state. So it's tabbed by each state. So you can go in here by state. Let's see. Let's just look at L.A. because Erin comes down to L.A. a lot, right, Erin?
Yeah.
So let me go to California and I can look up Los Angeles. There's Fresno, Lucerne Valley. Oh, here we go. Los Angeles. So we've got Break the Cycle, Center for Pacific Asian Family, Inc., Free Spirit Bilingual Shelters, Chicano Service Action Center, Good Shepherd Shelter, Genesis Center, Peace Over Violence, yada, 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 yada.
How much money are we talking about there?
Oh, gazillions of dollars. And so because the money just doesn't flow, a lot of people think that money just comes from the Violence Against Women Act. Well, that's absurd. I mean, that's only $600-700 million a year. That wouldn't even pay for the toilet paper these places buy. So the money's got to come from, there's much more money coming from somewhere. But in this directory, and I use it, by the way, I use it for referrals. But in this directory, you can find out what services they provide, whether it's crisis counseling, non-residential counseling, family counseling, whole list. But what's really, really interesting, and Erin mentioned this earlier, is it has an age limit for males.
Mm. Really?
Here's one for 18, 17. Ooh, here's one for none. So, but what does that mean? No age limit, or they take no males? 14. So it's very interesting information. And, if you're going to be in this business, I mean, if you're in a referral business, which we are in, or you provide services, which we do, then it's a mandatory resource you have to have. But just to pick it up, because as you both know, we could list all the shelters for men on one page.
We could. In the entire United States, we could list them all on one page. And I want to remind our listeners, our call-in AVFM hotline is 214-666-6148. You are welcome to call in if you want, if you have any questions or observations. I understand we have a caller on the line. John is on the line and has a question for us. Can we bring him on, James?
Yes, give me just one moment to transfer him, please.
Okay.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Good afternoon. Hi, John. How are you? You have a question for Harry?
Great. Yes, I do. Harry, I know that the National Coalition for Men at one point had initiated a lawsuit concerning the Selective service system regarding women reaching the age of 18 and not being required to register like men. I was wondering, has there already been any progress, and if so, how are things going with that lawsuit?
No, excellent question. Actually, we recently got a continuation on that. The attorney handling that is Mark Angelucci, also out of Los Angeles. There was an issue over some confusion on some information from the clerk's office, so we got that clarified by the court. We're in the process now of finalizing our response, but the case is still active. And we are anticipating going to court, going through the appeal process. The lower courts kicked our butt. They said the lower court said our case was not ripe. This was very interesting, I thought, because what that meant was that even though the Department of Defense under the Obama administration had officially said that women can now hold frontline positions in the military, that not enough of them had been occupied, basically, for the court to agree that things were equal. And basically, that was the issue. The only legal issue preventing women that I'm aware of, preventing women from being required to sign up for selective service was the fact that we were dissimilarly treated with respect to being able to hold frontline positions.
Okay, so if anybody was unclear on that, especially outside the United States, the selective service system is the system whereby men have to register to be eligible to be, are required by law to register to be eligible to be drafted. Right. I know that may seem obvious to some people, but others may not know it, especially our European listeners. The draft is not currently practiced in the United States, but it's on, I don't know, what would you call it? Standby. They can activate at any time, and that's what the selective service is for. And women aren't required and men are. So what's the gist of your suit? That they need to require women to do it, or just they need to either get rid of it or require women to do it?
Yeah, I'll answer that, but a little bit before that. Conscription is also a European concept, but some of the European nations now have done away with conscription, which is another issue. Our issue is only with respect to the discrimination. And I'm sorry, what was your question, Dean?
Just I was asking, was your lawsuit to try to force women to register for selective service? Or
exactly.
Okay.
But okay. I think what's important to know here, and a lot of people I don't think they think through it enough, is that women, we have an all-volunteer military right now. Because you're quite right. We have an inactive draft, okay? And we have a number of proposals on the table, alternative proposals on the table, which are not of an interest to NCFM. However, if you think through this, since we have an all-volunteer military, women can enter and exit at will and have all the rights and responsibilities. But they don't take, it's not responsibilities, have all the rights and benefits, but they don't have all the responsibilities and risks because they don't have to sign up for selective service. If you're a young man and you fail to sign up for selective service, even if you're in a wheelchair, you can be criminally charged, you can be fined $250,000, you'll be denied all sorts of benefits. If you want to go to college, you can't get federal loans, you can't get federal grants, all sorts of things happen. You can't get a security clearance, you can't work for the federal government. There's horrific things that happen to you if you just don't sign up. Women
Yeah, a lot of terrible things can happen to you if you don't sign up, and a lot of people don't even realize it can happen. I dealt with a man couple of years ago, who was in his late 50s and was looking to get government assistance to go back to school because he was a auto worker, I believe, but basically he needed retraining, and he couldn't because he had never registered for Selective Service. And what was interesting about that is, of course, he would have had to have done it back in. And he said, and Vietnam was alive at the time, and he said he went down and volunteered to sign up, and they turned him down because he was for medical reasons. Yeah. So he tried to enlist, and they said no. So he thought, well, I don't have to do the Selective Service then because they already said they don't need me. And now 30, 40 years later, that's it, denied. All kinds of government stuff he can't get out of, and he can't go unregister now. So it's ridiculous.
What's interesting is you don't hear and that just caused me to think of something. Maybe I can get a hold of the National Organization of Women; they can join our lawsuit. But you don't hear from organizations like NOW or the Feminist Majority or some of the politicians who are feminist oriented. You don't see them jumping up and down demanding equality for women so they can sign up for the draft.
Well, in my experience of being in America for the last few years, and I have lived in Santa Fe for 6 years, one of the things I noticed is anything to do with the women's movement on the whole is kept extremely quiet. So most people don't even know what a huge, huge juggernaut it has become.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct.
I'm frequently amazed when I tell people. I try to put it to you because I lose patience for it. Excuse me for being incoherent, but there are what I call what a lot of us call coffee shop feminists who just sit around with their friends and talk about equality while they're eating they're drinking their Starbucks or whatnot. And these people think you're crazy when you say feminism is a multi-billion-dollar industry with billions in tax dollars and charitable donations flowing through their coffers. And they say, well, nobody's paying me to be a feminist. And, to which the answer is, well, nobody pays you to vote Democratic either if you're a Democrat or Republican if you're a Republican. But do you not think these political parties get huge money? Feminism is the same way. And the ones holding the money, they hold on to it quite jealously, don't they?
Well, they've always sworn that they would never, ever. One of the reasons that they began this whole movement, which, as you know, began in Washington way back in the late 60s, was that they simply changed the goalposts. So no longer was capitalism the enemy, which meant both men and women fighting together. They simply turned and created the patriarchy, which is all men. So the goalposts moved, and along with the move came the fact that they would then thereafter very carefully structure an organization that would keep men and their inquiring minds out of what they plan to do has now coming to fruition in the last 50 years. And the damage it's done to the fabric of Western society is far worse than most people realize.
I can't agree with more what you just said. In fact, one of our primary objectives for NCFM this year, probably the next couple of years, and Dean's somewhat aware of this, is to get men's discussion groups, men's centers, male study curriculums developed on university campuses. And one of the reasons is that the major all universities basically been taken over by feminism. I mean, you can get 3 credit classes in teaching on women how to masturbate better. I mean, that's some sort of an educational pursuit in women's studies curriculum. Give me a break. How does that make the world a better place? It's crazy. But there have been 30 years of this stuff. 30 years of changing textbooks, of attacking the lexicon, changing the definitions of words, broadening the definitions of words that are related to crime. For example, and everyone knows this, domestic violence. Is it battery anymore? No. Domestic violence now or sexual assault can be something as a lewd stare.
Yeah.
Pounding your fist on
so
a
as long as they keep expanding the definitions, right, then they can. The Department of Education right now, just a couple of weeks ago or 10 days ago, had a meeting. They were trying to determine some new policies and procedures for the upcoming year. Through a redefinition of sexual assault on college campuses, they went from 7 categories to, I think, 17. Well, one of the reasons you do that is because you don't have enough data to support your theory. And as we know in feminism, they just make shit up. But they and I do it routinely. But they don't have enough data to support their theory. So this is very clever. So what they do is they expand the definition and they get more categories. Within 2 years from now, since there'll be 17 categories and all these little check marks, what we'll hear is this horrific epidemic of sexual assault on college campuses. And there may be one instant, whether it's real or not real, that gets 17 check boxes. And the general public will never know. Never know.
It's very interesting because when we had Phil Cook on here late last year, he made the exact same prediction that you just did.
Oh, yeah.
In 2 years, which I guess would be about a year and a half now at this point, we are going to see in the news sudden screaming headlines of a rash of an extraordinary number of rapes happening.
Yeah. Well, we just saw it in the military. Remember, what's her name? It was the senator. Who's that? Yeah, she's crazy. The most recent study in the military gave a 30% increase in sexual assaults. What? Well, how's this possible? I mean, if you look at San Diego's a military town. I helped found Honoring Our Troops, a nonprofit organization I share a wall with. We work with veterans and military people all day long. And they come in here all day long. And we hear all the time about the programs that the military has on education about sexual assault and rape and domestic violence. And they have family planning centers and family support centers. And they've got all sorts of counselors. And they've got gazillions of resources on military bases. And they have been educating people for decades about this stuff. So how is it that we have a 30% increase? Well, the way we have a 30% increase is because they broaden the research. They broaden the definitions within the research. They created non-existent violations. That's how they did it. And they did that so these radical people, and how they're all hooked up, I've never been able to figure out. But these radical people, in this case, a couple senators in the U.S. Senate, were able to kick the door open into the military to insert this radical feminist dogma, get it a little bit deeper into the military. And they did it very successfully. And within 10 days after that happened, they targeted universities. It's quite extraordinary. And it seems to be, like I said, I don't know how, but it certainly appears to be not just planned, but orchestrated. That's, to me, is terrifying. It's truly terrifying.
But I think it is. I mean, I think people don't realize it is hugely successfully orchestrated and has been for years. Do you have the Cinderella law that's coming in here? It's a new law for us. Basically, what it's about is a child neglect, emotional. It's the new, as you say, widening definitions. The new definition is coming under what's called the Cinderella law, and it is the parent, which of course is always the father, emotionally neglecting a child's needs. But the kick behind it, which is really scary, is that they will be asking the children to actually give evidence against their parents.
Oh, Lord.
I know. You see, the last time I knew all about that, this is what happened in communist China. Yeah. That is the move that actually, in many cases, put many good Chinese people into concentration camps, gulags.
I can hear people screaming that this is all conspiracy theory nonsense that we're talking about, but it's not. It's what you just said is literally true. And it's not that we think the communists are coming to get us. It's just you just drew a parallel and a very apt one. I mean, I do think it's orchestrated. I don't think it's necessarily there's one central planning committee doing it all, but it's clear that there is a desire to create an impression in the public's mind that women and children, they always go together, right? Same thing. Women and children are in danger. and men are the problem. And it's like that's a free money spigot somehow if you can sell that message. It seems to be the case. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. But if I can interject, I'll throw out a couple things that I hardly ever think about there in the back of my mind, but I pull them up every once in a while. I can remember several years ago, I was at some email list or something, right? And there was some sort of radical women's get-together in some town I can't remember. And there was a man, a reporter, who wanted to go in and cover it. And it was supposed to be open to everybody. And he was excluded. And the lady that excluded him simply explained jokingly that, this is a closed-door session. Men aren't supposed to know what we talk about. That always stuck in my mind. And then the second thing, if I can remember the second thing. Oh, yeah, this was even more striking to me. It was another distribution list. And I cannot find this email. I've looked for it a dozen times. Where there was some controversy over something that the CDC was doing. And one of the radical feminists said, we have to get control of the CDC. Well, now, if you look at that, what does that mean? I mean, they've already got control of the Department of Education, right? And a lot of other departments, because we've got Obama's White House Council on Women and Girls, and that's Valerie Jarrett who runs it, reports directly to the president. She's the only person that I've been aware of that has direct access to the White House. And then he created a position at the same rank as the department head, Department of Defense, Department of Energy, same rank. That's a liaison to the White House Council of Women and Girls, and they meet once a week. So they have direct influence into every department. And what you've seen, what I've seen, is if you go into some of these websites, even the CDC, some of the charts that, for example, Erin mentioned this new law in England, the chart that would show clearly that the vast majority of neglect, child abuse neglect, is by women. Men aren't even on the same planet, right? They're gone. They've just disappeared. And now you're seeing a change in the description where they used to be more definitive about genders and sex distinctions, where they just lump everybody into one. You're seeing that more in suicide now. An example, got a call from a guy yesterday up in Northern California. He and his wife had gone to an event at the school. There had been a couple suicides. The room was apparently filled with women. All the panelists were women except one man. There had been 2 suicides at this school, and they talked and talked and talked, and nobody mentioned the fact that they were both boys.
Yeah.
I have an observation here I'd like to share about what Harry's saying, and just how sinister what the feminists are doing and how bad for society it is.
Go ahead.
Thank you. It's probably going to seem a little strange at first, maybe even a little bit shocking, but I think at least those from the United States will recognize what I'm talking about. Maybe our European listeners might have a little challenge here because they're probably not that familiar with it. But what the feminists seem to be doing with these horrible things on campus and in the military are really aimed at driving men away. And it's really, if you're honest and you look at it carefully, it's not all that different from racial segregation that we saw in the United States, except instead of it being drawn along race lines, it's now drawn along gender lines.
I think that's absolutely right.
I completely agree, actually, and it's funny because I usually, people have a hard time believing it. We have an amazing article that we just published on A Voice for Men called "It's Time to Stop Waging the War on Sexual Violence with the Memes of the Hangman" by Piers Harlan, who's a lawyer who deals with false rape cases. And it's all about the history of lynching of black men in the United States, which most of the time when a black man was lynched, it was because he had been accused of raping a white woman. And he notices how in modern day discourse on rape, the wording and the thought patterns are exactly the same. They've just removed the word black or Negro from the dialogue. They are otherwise using all the same sort of reasonings to justify a presumption of guilt, saying that, a woman, you have to take a woman at her word. Jury system doesn't work. I mean, I actually had somebody recently, this was through Twitter, of course, but I mentioned a case of vigilante justice that had happened in England, actually, of a boy who was beaten to death on a false rape allegation. And this feminist's response was, well, I'm curious if, the police said they found no evidence of a rape. I wonder what really happened. So a young man was beaten to death, and that was right where her brain went. Well, he must have done something.
But that's the whole ideology, the whole argument about the fact that men have oppressed women for thousands of years. By virtue of having a Y chromosome, you are therefore doomed to batter, rape, and abuse women and children. That's always been the ideology. And it comes out, and as they enter, for instance, I was talking to Terry Stoddart from, I think it's SAFE or SAVE, I can't do all the that. Anyway, we were talking about the fact that there's a university that you have fraternities, don't you? And these were male fraternities, and already there's a case now brought by women saying that they can't have male fraternities anymore. Well, what will happen, where they've had this brotherhood for a long time, women will get in, and as you say, gradually they'll edge the men out. The men will then have nowhere to bond. And as the numbers are dropping steadily in universities across the Western world, not just America, of men, because it is not a safe place for men. It's a hostile environment. And this is going on in so many of the professions. I don't know about you, but we have many more women now as doctors, many more women as solicitors, many more women as barristers. It's going right the way through the professions. And men are turning away. But they're not. What is frightening to me is they're turning away, but they're not getting together in sufficient numbers to make the changes. They're simply sliding away and dropping out of society as we know it.
Well, I think what happens there, though, regardless of what issue we talk about, including all the ones that we've raised today thus far, if you go back to Warren Farrell's early work, and he talks about the disenfranchisement of man.
Yeah.
The way I say it is it's all about the total transfer of power, control, and wealth for those who primarily create and earn it, parenthetically men and women who care, end parentheses, to those who primarily don't, parentheses, radical feminists and manginas, end parentheses, period. And they've been very successful at staging themselves in such a way as to gain all this power. But they just don't want to stop. They just keep at it. But whether we're talking about Selective Service Administration, system the way it's set up now, that's a process of disenfranchisement. Whether you talk about restraining order misuse, that's a process of disenfranchisement, because the consequences of a restraining order, whether it's family court or criminal, are horrific. If you're in law enforcement, or you want to have a security clearance, or you're in some business where that sort of exposure is going to be detrimental, it will prevent you from doing things forever. The fact in child support, where you get behind, and we now have debtor's prison in the United States.
Yeah.
And the way they calculate interest, you can never get out of it. At 10% in California, let's say $40,000, and you're on a fixed income of $1,000 a month. That's $4,000 a year the first year, more than $4,000 the second, and they're going to give you a benefit. No, you can pay it to us at $50 a month. Well, you keep doing that, you're not even paying down the interest, so you never get free. You never get free. There's example after example after example after example. Today we have more reports in the newspaper about a Top Gun pilot who several years ago in the Navy apparently showed pornographic films to his in crew quarters or something. I haven't followed the story closely. And of course now those radical people in Washington, D.C. are going to destroy this guy's career. Well, you look at this and you have to, and I look at these things and I go, let me think this through. We've got, this is theoretically our best pilot in the whole Navy. He's been on several missions in war zones. He's put his life at risk more times than I can remember, or he can remember probably. We've spent millions of dollars training the guy, and we're going to throw him out because he showed some pornographic movie to his crew several years ago. Now, I have to tell you, in my brain, that doesn't equate. You might take that guy aside and say, look, you're going to lose some rank because you should have known better, but I'm not going to destroy your life because of it. Now, that's a process of disenfranchisement.
Yeah.
Everything we want to discuss today, virtually, and I don't even know what some of the stuff is, I would say you can take back to a process of disenfranchisement. Now, if you do that enough over time, and all you do is start graduating women from universities, we have to create jobs for them, do we not?
Yeah.
Well, if those jobs are filled by men, or if women don't have equal access to all these good jobs in the military, where do we put them? If you walk out wherever you're at right now, if you were to walk out your front door and look around, I would challenge you to find something built by a woman. Challenge you to do that, because you won't find anything. Everything you see will most likely have been literally constructed by men. Okay? So until you get control, I think they have to get control of that labor force and turn us back into tradesmen. And they have to have all the positions of power, which means they have to disenfranchise us from those positions. For example, like closing all the men's clubs. Right? Augusta's golf tournament. They jumped up and down until they got Augusta. But they have women this, women that everywhere. And one thing we do quite effectively, I might add, is that our members, not our organization, but our members have filed hundreds and hundreds of lawsuits against businesses in California that discriminate against men. And
what would you say your success rate is with these lawsuits?
99.99%.
Well done.
Really?
Gosh, that's brilliant. I wanted to just say something, Harry, quickly while I remember it, because you were talking about ombudsmen or people or whatever you're supposed to call them. I was in Slovenia a few years ago, and I think it's so interesting to look at countries where women have been preferred over men for long periods of time. And it was the Slovenian ombudswoman who asked me to come over. So I flew over there, and I was really shocked by what I found. Women in all positions of power. And she said to me very proudly, I have 50 staff, 49 are women, and there is one man, and he's the receptionist. How about that for a look into the future?
Yeah, and these are the people who are supposed to be expressing tolerance and equality and equitable treatment.
It never was. It never was. That was the big Trojan horse full of lies that rolled into women's lives in the late 69 and 70s, and many, many women bought it.
That's correct.
Yes.
Do you guys know who Casey Gwynn is?
No, I haven't. No.
Casey Gwynn, for lack of a better, this is the way I always say it, so cover your ears if you don't like it, but he's the second biggest swinging dick in the domestic violence industry worldwide, next to Joe Biden. And San Diego is the international capital of the domestic violence world.
Ray, explain that to me. Tell me how it came about like that.
Okay, glad to.
Thank you.
Casey was the city attorney of San Diego for years and years and years, and he has he's been at my office. We've talked several times here and there in conferences and stuff, but nice guy. We don't agree, but nice guy. Yeah. And he explains that he was abused by his dad. He does it publicly. Mm-hmm. So he carries that sort of baggage. And somehow he's very competent at what he does. Several years ago, he had a pilot project along with a couple other people in San Diego from the San Diego Domestic Violence Council, and they opened a family justice center on trial basis. And a family justice center is a one-stop shop for DV victims. So you can go and get a restraining order, and if you come in and you've been physically abused, then they have some medical attention there. They can get you to the hospital. If you have kids, they have a place that they can take care of the children while you're being accommodated. They have people from churches there that can help you with your spirituality. They now they house the district attorney's office, the DV, people from the district attorney's office, the DV people from the city attorney's office. The San Diego Police Department now runs the operation, and they have their DV investigators there. It's a one-stop shop. And not a bad idea if you think about it, really. Good management. And anyway, he took this to D.C., and George Bush Jr. gives him $25 million to open up 16 centers nationwide. And through that, he opens up the Family Justice Center Foundation. And they've taken in large donations, and that they go around the universe, or America, North America, now Europe and elsewhere, Mexico, encouraging and opening more family justice centers. It's a major movement within the DV world.
And you just hit on something there that I think is important, because one of the things that we run into in the men's movement is that the only people you typically see criticizing feminists at all, at least in the United States, are conservatives. However, most of us in the movement have noticed that routinely, whether Republicans or conservatives are in charge or not, these misandric policies, these gynocentric women-favoring policies still go through, still get passed. You just said George Bush Jr. gave him a bunch of money for expanding the anti-women's violence programs. I mean, it does not seem, I mean, maybe it's all started on what you'd call the political left, but it certainly doesn't seem to just stop there.
Old school chauvinism. Basically, if mama ain't happy, nobody happy. I mean, I don't know a man on the planet who, if when confronted with a woman screaming in their face, I don't care if she's 4'2", weighs 80 pounds, that they're not going to back down or feel like they need to cower in front of her. It used to be, I guess, in the caveman days, you'd pick up a club, but you can't do that anymore. They've equalized the battle, as it were. But a lot of these guys, and then they go for the votes, right? That whole White House Council on Women and Girls was a payback, Obama payback to women giving him elected president. They wanted their own damn department. They wanted a Department of Women, like the Department of Defense. And I'm sure Obama said, hey, I can't pull that off. The legislature's never going to grant that. By executive order, though, I can create this council. But look at all the work Warren Farrell's been doing on the White House Council on Boys and Men. And when he submitted that to the Obama administration, after Obama had invited him to sit on the one for women, they gave that thing to some lowly 26-year-old guy in the White House that's in charge of faith-based programs. And it hasn't left there. It hasn't left.
I'm going to give you a little bit of a pushback there. I don't think there was any time when men actually, I know you were joking, but people quote us out of context all the time. I don't think there was any time when men routinely would just club women when they didn't like what they had to say. I think men have always been very protective of women. Well, I think that may be what works against us now.
That was the old stereotype. You see the cartoons with a guy in the loincloth with a big club, the caveman. Right. The caveman. I think that's the perception. That's the perception. And
it's just wrong, because you know what? If you look at those older cartoons, you also see the old cartoons of the battle axe wife holding on to the rolling pin or whatever, and that was supposed to be funny, but it was something people recognized, right? Now they'd call that misogyny or something. I'm sorry.
You look at some of these politicians, though, and I think Erin's familiar with this piece of legislation. In California, it's called SB 967. And she mentioned a conversation with Terry Stoddard, and Terry was in Sacramento recently testifying.
That's right.
And so was Diane Thompson. And they're both NCFM members, by the way, and Diana Thompson's one of our advisors. So think of it, Dean, you're an NCFM member, too. And
oh, yes, I am. I'm proud to be an NCFM member, and I think anybody here listening ought to join. Go ahead.
And I'm going to digress a little bit here. It's very interesting, because one of the things NCFM does that people don't know about and we don't share very often is that we help other organizations in many ways, including incubating them or helping them start up, providing them with some resources, whether it's in terms of dollars or in terms of management support or guidance or administration. So our members, you look around at some of these organizations, you will find our members in almost all of them. And in some of those places, you will find the people who run them are NCFM members, and were NCFM members before they started their organization. I just wanted to get that out. What were we talking about before that, Dean?
No, that's okay. I find that interesting, and I want to ask you more about that because I get that all the time, that we're not actually doing anything, we're just complaining. But in fact, what my experience is, there's a lot of us out there flying under the radar. Like I had a woman recently tell us that we did a protest on a campus in Kingston, Ontario, in Canada.
Yeah.
And we had a woman try to tell us, stay out of Canada, stay off our colleges. And I said, too late, we're already there. And she said, well, we kicked you out. They kicked you off. Well, no, they didn't. But more to the point, we have guys on that campus who just don't want anybody to know.
That's right.
That they're sympathizers. I mean, it's kind of scary that there has to be this little underground here, but it is what it is, right? We're down to something. I think Miles Groth, and I may be misquoting him, but I think Miles Groth recently said here in the U.S., at least, the incoming freshman class this year nationwide is only 37% male. How does that end? You know, where does it end? Because all you're hearing is a push to get women into the few fields left where men mostly dominate. And at some point, I don't see how the college system goes on without collapsing into irrelevance. Not because there's something innately inferior about women, but you have no men, hardly any men left. I don't like the word mangina myself because people get all mad about it. But sycophantic men who just go along with all of this, and men who want to actually do things. It's made clear that they're not wanted. What's going to be left? Especially because you just said it, Erin, all these women doctors, all these women lawyers. People get very angry, but the truth is, it's been found over and over again that most female lawyers, most female doctors, once they choose to have children, they take extended periods out of their working schedule.
Yeah, I think you've got to also look at how women operate, because this is from my expertise on working with women over 50 years now, nearly. Women want different things out of life in many ways than men. A man can easily make his work, which is who he is, fill his life, whereas women tend to be much more diverse. They actually will get into their careers, but essentially, whatever anybody says, the majority of women want families, and they want men in their lives, and they want children. My only hope is, as the younger girls come up and move into universities and look around and see the dearth of men in their lives, they will begin to be part of the pushback against the feminist movement.
Well, certainly everybody else seems afraid to. I know we're having the first international men's conference, men's and boys, AVFM men's and boys conference in Detroit in June, and about half the speakers there are going to be women, and we have already had a number of women sign up for tickets.
That's wonderful.
And I actually do believe, as odd as it sounds, right, because you have a men's movement, but if it's truly a men's movement, just like feminism should have been but never was about equality between the sexes, but if you are working towards some kind of equity or equality between the sexes, you need both sexes involved. I mean, it's half the human race, and we were meant, whether you believe it's God or just evolution, we're meant to be partnered, men and women. And you can't do things to women without affecting men, and vice versa. So, but I do think there's something in men that just sort of waits for women to say, yeah, when are you going to do something about this? And I'm being incoherent, but you know what I mean? It's like they almost need women to tell them it's okay to have these thoughts or to do something about this.
To some degree, I think you're right on the money, Dean. And actually, you're seeing that in the movement now. You're seeing organizations form that. What's the new organization with respect to shared parenting? It's Women for Shared Parenting. I believe.
Yeah, I'm one of them. Yeah.
Oh, well, Erin would know. I mean, so here we've had a group of very prominent women who come together, and correct me if I'm wrong, Erin. who've come together and share a lot of our concerns, but they've said to themselves, if we just focus on one issue, we can probably minimize the criticism and maybe affect the change we're looking for, and in the process do other things.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is the fact that if we can make immediately a couple decide to divorce or separate or leave each other, the shared parenting, equal shared parenting. Don't let's settle for shared parenting, because that can be fiddled with, but equal shared parenting. Then, and this is the interesting thing, and this is what saddens me. Within months, when I was first co-opted to join, and other women now have across the world, there's a huge amount of us, very powerful women. I have to say to you as men, I do not feel that if this was put to men, you would see the response like that from men. Because men haven't yet woken up. And I'm scared that they're going to wake up too late.
Yeah, but if they do wake up, it could get really messy.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I honestly believe, I know some of this is culture, but I honestly believe biology gets in our way. We're wired to worry about women first. We're not worried to I hate the word wired, because I don't believe anything in human nature is completely immutable, but men just want to see themselves as the saviors of women, so
not
I'm being incoherent.
The protectors. Think of it this way. I saw recently there was some movie about the 300, the Greeks have that, the 300, the army of 300 or something.
Right.
So in one of the things I saw about the movie, there was a History Channel thing that talked about it in reality, not the fictional movie. And one of the comments was, in those days, those times, it was 50-50. There was a trade-off that men in such groups were raised as providers and defenders. And women were raised to care for the men and to give birth. And the trade-off was men were prepared to die in battle and women were prepared to die in birth. If you think back upon it, we didn't have an AMEA, a modern medical society. That seemed to be a balance, and everybody kind of knew what was what. And that makes some sense. And I think you're talking about nature versus nurture here, and to some degree, I think there's a lot to be said about that. Then there's the XY factor. Some people simply have more than one or the other, and that makes them more inclined to, you can have a woman that's kind of on the masculine side and a man on the feminine side. Is that all nurture? I don't think so. As you're saying, some of that's nature.
Sure it is.
But whatever it is, I don't believe that what's happened in the last 50 years, which I consider our dark ages, has anything to do with the idea that there could suddenly be this movement that has excluded the other half of the human race from their lives as fathers and partners. I don't think it's ever happened historically, ever happened.
No.
Well, there was actually at least one case, I believe. There was a cast of people, I believe this was in China. Well, if somebody presses me on it, I'll go look it up. But basically there was a conquered, subjugated people, and the ruling class did literally decide to make it so that children would take their mother's name and fathers would be required to go elsewhere when they became fathers.
Really?
And yep.
But that's a tiny. That's not a. This is international. What's happening now? It's not somewhere in China.
Yes,
no, I know, but I just mean, but the results were very interesting. You basically had a subjugated people who had no way of fighting against the people who were in charge of them. The men were disconnected from the children. The men were disconnected from the women. And they ceased to be a threat to the ruling elites because of that. And that sounds all very conspiratorial, but it's actually what happened. And it's like, are we doing this to ourselves on purpose now? If you look at the biology, fathers are desperately needed by children, and we've got a whole generation of children now raised without them. And How anybody can think that's not harmful, I don't know. I mean, it literally affects a child's development. There's multiple longitudinal studies that even show that if the biological father is not present while a girl is growing up, she starts getting her period earlier. It basically, which only just means it's biologically screwing up child development to have fathers excluded from their children's lives, and we're doing that on a mass, unprecedented scale. It's extraordinary, really.
Dean, what amazes me, and you've probably thought through this, what amazes me, Dean and Erin, is the fact that we know all this stuff. I mean, in terms of DV, look at John Hamill's work, and look at Professor Fieber's work. You know, we know what the truth is data-wise. You look at, who was it? Divorced Dads with Stanford Braver, the huge study on divorce. We know what the consequences are of fatherlessness and other work like that. And the politicians, do they know too? I'm going to make the case they don't.
I think they do, you see. I think it's what's happening to men all across the Western Front. The politicians do know, but they don't dare raise their voices because they are afraid that they would be cast out into the cold. And it's that fear that men have of women.
You know, I hear
women's power.
Oh. Go ahead, Erin. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying that to me, I know they know. There is a conspiracy, though, in the old conspiracy thing, of silence among men. And this is why they don't speak up to protect themselves. They are helpless to protect their children. And as more and more men and the figures for suicide rates get higher and higher, it's going to take a big shift to make politicians, and you have to remember, I don't know about your position in America, but our problem is that not only do we have politicians like Harriet Harman, who are the minister's women, there's several of them, all of whom make statements like men are not necessarily harmonious to family life in policy papers. These are the women who say, yes, we need men in primary schools, but unfortunately men can't be trusted with children, because all men, of course, are pedophiles. And that not only are those people in power, but also behind so many of the male politicians are radical feminist wives and partners. I don't know how much influence, or if she is possibly a radical feminist, but how much influence does Michelle, Barack Obama's wife, have over what he does?
Well, the interesting thing there is that at this point, and this is something that Karen Strawn, Go Writes What, once observed, is that we've reached the point where younger people under 40, just accept the feminist narrative on history as the norm. I mean, I can't tell you how often I run into people in their 20s who will just say, well, of course women were oppressed and routinely beaten by their husbands just 30 years ago. And they look at you like you've spoken hateful heresy when you say, no, that's not the way it was. But if you're old enough, you know it wasn't like that. Yes, there were issues to talk about, but they've accepted the feminist narrative as normative. And Michelle Obama's only going to be, 54, 55 years old? She's not even old enough to remember a lot of this stuff. I truly believe that there's a contingent of true believers who they're not even necessarily identifying as feminism anymore. They've just been indoctrinated to believe these things.
If you don't mind, let me interject something.
Yeah,
of course.
Dean, I think you're right on the money. I mean, I mentioned earlier, one of our priorities is to get more firmly established in our university systems. We really need to do that. We can't go to the lower grades, but we can go into the university systems. We need to get a foothold there, or in my view, there's no hope of turning this around, and that's a 20-year gameplay there. I wanted to go back a little earlier. While there's certainly politicians that do this stuff deliberately, I'm going to give this what I forgot earlier, talking about Terry Stoddard. When Terry and Diana went up to Sacramento testifying SB 967, that bill is sponsored by a state senator named DeLeon out of Los Angeles. And if one were to watch the hearing, which you can do on the internet, watch the hearing and you look at this guy. I mean, he is young. He's totally groomed. There's not a hair out of place. He's wearing a tailored suit. It looks like a tailored suit. He's extraordinarily articulate. But if you listen to his rebuttal after some testimony by the ladies, by Terry and Diana, and I call them ladies because they are, and they're both friends of mine, it becomes clear that he was doing it by rote. Because in the area having to do with the false accusations, he didn't have a clue. He had no clue. This guy had been programmed. You know, somebody got to him through staff, somebody came in with an agenda, got past the gatekeeper, maybe it's one of his staffers. We got to do this. This is what the national doing on the national level. You know, let's get it in gear. And this guy is a career politician. And then back to Erin's point, I think to some degree he did it because of that, you know, because he wanted to get purchased. Mm-hmm. But he had no clue. He was nothing but a mouthpiece. And the other people on the judiciary, the committee and the panel, when you watched them, there was at least one senator who took exception to the bill, but they all voted for it.
Yeah.
None of them had the courage, for whatever reason, to say no.
I genuinely believe that, and some people, change starts small. It just does. If you go back to the move to end slavery, that was a 400-year process. I don't believe that what we're doing is a 400-year process, but the point is that it takes time to shift a culture. I do think men are waking up. I do think women are waking up. What I'm noticing is an awful lot of people in their 30s and 40s coming into their prime now are getting a lot less shy about talking about these things than anybody was 20, 30 years ago. And I'm routinely hearing from people in their 20s and even their teens who are interested in this stuff. But yes, what you just said about a 20-year game plan, probably there. But I think the awakening is happening. Let's put it to you this way, that way. I think the awakening is happening. Now, of course, they're waking up to devastation, but they're at least realizing, oh, this is devastation. So, I'm
sorry, can I interrupt?
Of course.
Yep.
I think you're right on the money again, Dean, but let me give you some specific examples about the awakening. Okay. For example, I'm a local guy, primarily a local guy. I do pay dues for the San Diego Domestic Violence Council, and when they meet, I'm on their Men's Leadership Forum. The Men's Leadership Forum is comprised of a number of people who are committed to raising the awareness of community leaders about domestic violence. And I also help them develop a faith-based domestic violence information, education, and awareness program, which, by the way, to my knowledge, was the first program of its type in the nation. It had a page in the brochure devoted to abused men several years ago, and the program's still functioning. But what's interesting is the co-chair of the San Diego Domestic Violence Council and the Men's Leadership Forum is a man with a master's degree in women's studies. We recently got another transplant. I don't know if he's got a degree in women's studies, but you couldn't tell him apart. He came in from Colorado, and he's now doing DV programs for the Navy. So these are two of the people who are the players of the Men's Leadership Forum. Nice guys. Although for the first couple of years, the gentleman with the master's degree and I went to loggerheads. But the point I want to make is this. If we're in a meeting and we want to talk about anything systematically, about the system, about how bad the child support system is, or the family court system with respect to working with dads and giving them anything that has to do with the system, they automatically shut down. They refuse to talk about it. If anything has to do with feminism, they refuse to talk about it. Before this young man took over co-chair of the San Diego Domestic Violence Council, there was a woman in charge of it, and she's now got a PhD. Her name's Dawn. Nice lady. She married a female police officer, but nice lady. Nice person. Nice human being. And she came to my office one day and asked me if I wanted to sit on the San Diego Domestic Violence Council Advisory Council. And I looked at her like she was crazy. I said, Dawn, have you lost your mind? I mean, they're not going to approve that. She said, no, I can get that done. And it never happened. And so a couple of times I asked about it, and then she went her way, and then this guy took over. And one day we're in a forum meeting, and he asked me, he says, Harry, how come you never took the offer to sit on the advisory council? I said, well, no one ever got back to me. He said, I'll look into it. And so a couple more meetings, he doesn't say anything, and I bring it up to him. I said, what happened about the advisory council? And you may or may not know that I coined another phrase called feminism, and you can find it, F-E-M-E-ism, feminism. And he goes, well, you know, the use of the word feminism doesn't help.
Well,
so that's the reason, I guess, that I'm not on the advisory council of the San Diego Domestic Violence Council. And before I forget, if you guys have never seen this, if you guys have a pencil or pen, why don't you write the word women's studies? Just write down women's studies.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at women, you'll find in women is the word men, correct?
Yeah.
In
yes.
studies, you will find the word die. And I discovered that several years ago. I made a big poster of it. It's on my wall. You know, I mean, that's just too good, guys. You got to share that.
Well, it's getting to where we do need to start wrapping the show up, but I'm only just going to repeat what I said before. While the situation is pretty dire on our campuses and our government is nowhere to be seen to fixing anything, I am seeing an increasing number of young men waking up to what the world really has to face for them and realizing they don't want any part of it. And I am seeing an increasing number of women, especially younger women, who see a problem and realize they have to do something about it. There's the old phrase attributed to Rabbi Hillel, if not us, who? And if not now, when? Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening, come visit us, come see us at the Detroit conference in June, the first international ABFM conference for boys and men's issues. Erin will be there. I'll be there. Senator Ann Cools will be there. Quite a few people will be there. We're getting close to selling out, believe it or not. We've only got about 50 tickets left, 50 seats left. Is there any closing thoughts you'd like to leave with us, Harry?
Well, just with respect, first, thank you very much for having me on, but with respect to the National Coalition for Men, we've been around a long time. We're gender inclusive. Our national treasurer is a woman, Deborah Watkins down in Texas. President of our Tennessee, Kentucky chapter is Leah Parrott, PhD. The president of our chapter, our college chapter, Montana State University Bozeman, is a wonderful woman by the name of Nevada Thompson. And by the way, that was the first men's rights organization ever officially recognized on a state university in the United States of America. Maybe the only one still. We did that a couple of years ago. So we are gender inclusive. We believe in fair treatment and equality as much as possible. We've been around forever. Just forever. If you'd like to join us, you can do that at ncfm.org. You'd be welcome to come aboard. And again, we have so many people doing so many good things in so many different places around the world that it would be hard to thank them all. But it's a heck of an organization. I'm happy to be part of it.
Just so you know, Sage Gerard is also in charge of Kennesaw State Men, who has what's probably the second men's organization there in Georgia on a college campus, and he's also with a Voice for Men. But yeah, it's great to hear what they're doing there in Montana, and we hope to see more of that sort of action happening other places. And yeah, a lot of people don't know about NCFM, which is why I'm glad we were able to get Harry on here. As he said, they do a lot of flying under the radar, but they do a lot of lawsuit work, and they do a lot of, well, I don't know if it's exactly covert work, but it's work where you don't realize NCFM is the ones doing it. So check them out at www.ncfm.org. Become a member. I'm glad to be one. Erin, do you have any closing thoughts for us tonight?
Oh, yes, I'm already planning our lunch together, either in San Diego or LA. Thank you very, very much, Harry.
I'm looking forward, Erin, and if you would consider being one of our advisors, I'd love to talk to you about that.
Great. Well, let's do it.
All right.
Well, next time you're in LA, maybe you guys will get together.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, let's get the show closed up. Next week, at this same time, we will have the Tales from the Infrared show. Me, Christian Shisson, probably Rachel and Jim will be joining us. We'll be talking about Star Wars and the expanded universe. That's our show on the geek culture. And in 2 weeks, we will be back here with the Revelations with Erin Pizzey, same time. Senator Ann Cools, I'm still working on her, but hopefully we'll get her. So anyway, thanks all for joining us. James, why don't you take us home?
You have been listening to Domestic Violence Revelations with Erin Pizzey and me, her co-host, Dean Esme. Our show's opening music and closing music is known as Sunshine and Eternal Hope, respectively, and is by Kevin MacLeod and used under Creative Commons Attribution License, with a link in the show notes. We also want to thank James Huff and Paul Elam, and all of those who are part of the A Voice for Men community for their support for this show. Remember, if you're a victim of domestic violence, no matter if you're a man or a woman, gay or straight, adult or child, no matter what your race, your ethnicity, your religious views, your sexual orientation, or anything else, what you went through or are going through now is not okay. You should not be afraid to talk about it with people who understand and care. Just remember to talk to people who do understand and not to ideologues who fear the truth or will marginalize you and your experiences. Remember, the truth about domestic abuse is often painful to hear, especially to ideologues, and especially to those who've been through it and been marginalized and ignored. But remember, in truth, there is hope and healing. And we hope you'll be a part of helping to spread the truth and the healing. Please join us next time on Domestic Violence Revelations with Erin Pizzey and yours truly, Dean Esme. God bless.